The spiritual awakening industry lied to you, not maliciously, but strategically, because bliss is easier to sell than erosion. Light is easier to package than loss. So you were told awakening feels like expansion, like bliss, like love, like synchronicity, like manifesting parking spots and dream partners. You were shown glow. You were shown breakthroughs. You were shown the after. You were told that once you raise your vibration, life flows. Doors open. Money arrives. Relationships align. But let me ask you something. What if awakening doesn't start with flow? What if it starts with friction? What if it starts with collapse? What if the first sign of evolution isn't clarity, but destabilization? And what if that destabilization is so subtle that you just think something is wrong with you? Because that's what I thought. And if no one prepares you for that, you might mistake transformation for failure. Here's the narrative that gets sold. You awaken, you align, you ascend, you attract. And it's always neat. It's linear. It makes sense. Your timeline upgrades. Your relationships harmonize. If you own a business, it scales. Your nervous system feels calm. And if you're not feeling all of that, if instead you feel unsettled or restless or strangely out of place in your own life, the implication, and it is subtle, but the implication is that you must not be doing it right. Maybe you're not high vibe enough. Maybe you haven't cleared enough trauma. Maybe your ego is still in the way. And slowly, the responsibility of all of that shifts to you. Maybe you need another program, another certification, another retreat. But here's the distortion. The industry markets expansion, but minimizes erosion. It glorifies manifestation, but ignores grief. It sells alignment, but hides misalignment. It talks about quantum leaps, but not about identity collapse. And that matters, because when collapse begins and you don't know it's part of the process, you assume you failed. You assume you regressed. But awakening isn't additive, it's subtractive. Before anything expands, something dissolves. And disillusion does not feel like bliss. It feels like friction. Let me tell you what this actually looks like. Your values shift before your life shifts. So externally, everything can look fine, but internally, something is moving. You start outgrowing rooms that once felt safe. I remember sitting at that table once, same people, same conversations, and thinking, I don't fit here anymore. No one did anything wrong, nothing dramatic happened, I just wasn't the same. You wake up in careers you once prayed for and feel nothing. Not anger, not resentment, just a quiet absence. You look at your 5-year plan and feel grief. Not because it failed, but because you no longer want it. And that is destabilizing, because your nervous system is wired for identity consistency. It prefers the familiar. So when your identity starts loosening, your brain reads it as a threat. And therefore, you panic. You think, I'm losing motivation. I'm self-sabotaging. I'm depressed. I'm blocked. That was always my favorite. You start trying to fix it. Another retreat, another modality, another rebrand. Or you bypass it. You call grief low vibration. You call anger ego. You call confusion lack of faith. But suppression isn't transcendence. And slowly you start mistrusting your own evolution. Not because you're regressing, but because no one told you this part exists. Awakening destabilizes before it clarifies. Your nervous system recalibrates before your vision sharpens. Your identity dissolves before your purpose reorganizes. That's structural change, and structural change feels like loss before it feels like power. Here's the part no one wants to admit. You think awakening makes you stronger immediately, but first it makes you unusable. Unusable to old expectations. Unusable to roles you've outgrown. Unusable to dynamics you used to tolerate. And that can feel like you are becoming difficult. I remember realizing I couldn't respond to certain conversations the same way anymore. I couldn't smile through misalignment. I wasn't dramatic about it, but I couldn't perform it either. And that felt risky. But what if that unusable phase is actually filtration? What if evolution removes what no longer fits before it reveals what does? So, if you've ever thought, why does this feel harder after I started doing the work? This is why. Because you're not adding, you're shedding. And shedding isn't very pretty. It's raw, it's inconvenient, it makes other people uncomfortable, and therefore it makes you question yourself. But what if the discomfort isn't a detour? What if it's the doorway? Let me explain this in a grounded way. Your brain builds identity through repetition, through roles, beliefs, social mirrors, and achievements. If you repeat something long enough, it becomes you. So when awakening loosens those repetitions, there's a gap. You're not who you were, but you're not who you're becoming. And humans hate that space. So we rush to label it. We call it burnout, or we call it failure or crisis. And sometimes it is those things, but sometimes it's evolution. And evolution is violent to the ego because it removes the mask before it reveals the face. I remember the exact moment. I realized I didn't want the life I had engineered. On paper, it looked successful, but internally it felt hollow. No breakdown, no catastrophe, just a quiet realization, this isn't mine anymore. That didn't feel spiritual, it felt like grief. And I almost mislabeled it as burnout. But it wasn't burnout, it was identity erosion. And identity erosion whispers before it restructures. So let me ask you something uncomfortable. What if the friction is the sign? What if the anxiety isn't regression, but recalibration? What if the confusion isn't weakness, but restructuring? What if awakening feels like subtraction because it is? And here's the harder one. What if the part of you trying to escape this phase is the very identity that's dissolving? Who would you be if you stopped trying to fix the friction and started listening to it? So, if this resonates, you're not broken, you're between identities, and that space can feel lonely. It can feel destabilizing. It can feel like you're losing yourself. But maybe you're not losing yourself. Maybe you're losing who you're not. In the next video, we're going to talk about something critical. How to tell the difference between burnout and evolution. Because they can feel almost identical. But one requires rest and the other requires courage. And mislabeling them can cost you years. If you're in that in-between space, comment evolving. And if it feels right, subscribe if you want Awakening Explained without the marketing gloss. We're just getting started. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, I'll simply say bye-bye for now. Much love.